Hello.
Hello. Happy Christmas to everybody who does Christmas.
Indeed. Wow, it's been a lot of prep going on. That's right. To get this video ready, I can tell you a lot of memories getting rather full on various devices. But yes, our last transmission of 2016. What a strange year it's been.
It's been a very, very odd year. Next year, hopefully, will be better. We'll see.
We'll see. We have to hope. We have to make it good.
Yeah.
So, there's a few tributes to various people who've disappeared this last year, and one of them being a DJ called David Mancuso, who some people might know because he started a club called The Loft in New York in 1970. And he basically brought the spirit of San Francisco into club culture and ran these private clubs in his own house, which he didn't charge any admission for and which everybody was welcome, and kind of modelled the experience a bit like having a kind of psychedelic trip. And he always had an incredible high-end audio system. And basically the legacy continues. There's a club called the Lucky Sound system in London. There's one in Japan. He died earlier this year. There's been some great tributes online, including a fantastic one by a woman called Colleen Cosmo Murphy, which is on Mixcloud. Anyway, he loved music that would take you places, and he loved sort of psychedelic breakdowns. And this is a track off this Meters Rejuvenation album called what is it? It Ain't No Use was one of his favourite tunes apparently, and it's got an incredible drum and bass guitar kind of psychedelic freak out towards the end. Brilliant album.
If you want to get an idea of what he used to play, there are two CD compilations called The Loft, Volumes 1 and 2, which are very hard to find now, but they're very good.
We'll pepper this tonight's session with various tracks that he loved.
Keeping up my really good standard of great covers. This is, this kind of followed on, kind of slightly New Orleans-y kind of feel to this track, actually. It's called Make Me Feel Better. It's from one of the very many Michael Henderson records, which you can usually pick up for virtually no money, but all of whom have 2 or 3 really good tracks on. And this is off the album Solid, which was kind of late 70s, 1976 time. Michael Henderson, bass player, soul singer.
Yeah, with a sort of New Orleans meets Sly Stone vibe. Yeah. Well, we've just heard this week of another amazing drummer who's moved on, Alphonse Mouzon, and very kind of varied career, including playing with Weather Report and McCoy Tyner, but also maybe not that well known that he was the drummer on the first Eugene McDaniel's album, The Headless Heroes of the Apocalypse. Him and Milas Vitus, who were of course the original drum and bass combination for Weather Report. And we listened to a great track called Freedom Death Dance. This is a double CD with also the Outlaw album. Very original artist, but some great drumming from Alphonse.
Very good. Then later on, when he was playing with, around the same time he was playing with Herbie Hancock in a kind of late version of Headhunters, he put out 2 albums on MPS in Germany and Pause in the States. And he kind of got almost like a kind of fusion disco kind of style drumming, which I always really quite liked actually. And this is off an album with guests with people like Herbie Hancock, Hubert Laws, Freddie Hubbard, Michael Brecker, so forth on it as well. And it's a track called Just Because of You, which has a really nice road solo from Herbie.
And definitely a sort of what was known as the jazz dance breakdown.
Yeah, kind of samba-ish breakdown.
Well, this album is called Back Together Again. It's him with Larry Coryell, because he was also part of 11th House in the early 70s. this definitely has a combination of what John was just talking about, the fusion and the disco. We listened to a fusion track, which also features Philippe Catherine, who, what was the band he was in?
Belgian band.
Belgium.
Placebo.
It was Placebo.
Was it Placebo?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Anyway, this was definitely high-end fusion. A lot of tom-tom rolls going on.
Yeah.
And we had some very unusual kind of fashion outfits. You can see him there with Larry Coryell.
Good line in hats. Almost.
Very good line of hats.
Keeping with that kind of fusion vein, went for Return to Forever's Romantic Warrior and the track called Sorceress, which is written and features quite heavily Lenny White, drummer. Everyone knows Return to Forever. Al Di Meola, Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea. This was like it's almost like a kind of American response to kind of Yes and all the people doing stuff to do with kind of sorcerers and all that kind of stuff.
And this was very much the period when sort of all kind of genres were crossing over and mixing, and quite a lot of prog meets jazz type stuff happening, and rock meets jazz, and been really big fan of George Duke, and John and I both seem to have picked this album up in the last there we go. In the last few weeks, it's George Duke's The Aura Will Prevail, which was he still playing with Zappa around this time? Yeah. And
I know, just after actually. Literally just after.
Two Zappa tracks on this album, and there was a period of albums that he did on MPS around this time, which I just think are absolutely sensational, sound incredible. And John was pointing out that he had the same mixing engineer as Zappa.
Yeah, Kerry McNabb, who George Duke on his website talks about a lot, saying he's just an amazing guy.
But great stuff, really great album, fantastic sound, and real progressive keyboard electronic wizardry. Amazing. We listened to Uncle Remus.
Yeah. Version by Frank Zappa on Apostrophe as well, that song. So moving forward, we stay with George and just move forward just at the beginning of his period with Epic, and played the track Carry On. Some of the same people involved actually, so on the MPS time. First 2 or 3 MPS albums from George Duke, particularly good, I think. Great stuff. So it seems to be such a huge influence on. Here's so many people playing at the moment.
Yeah.
Hear bits of George Duke coming out.
Well, indeed, and here is one of them. This is the first Thundercat album, The Golden Age of Apocalypse, and I don't remember what the name of the track was.
Love.
For Love I Come.
Yeah.
Which actually is on that The Aura Will Prevail album. Thundercat has a very George Duke sounding voice. But this is a great album actually, and all of Thundercat is worth exploring, but certainly the lineage from George Duke is very clearly heard on this track, this album.
I particularly like that new EP.
Yes, so do I.
Well,
It's the best one.
Which I can't remember what it's called. But I think it's almost his best work, actually.
Yeah, I think it is.
So there, we move from Thundercat to one of my 2 records of the year, and it's Beyonce. And it's Lemonade, which I think is a fantastic piece of work, actually.
Which is the first that I'd heard that you even liked this album, was when you
really?
produced it as your
album.
album
No,
of
I've
the
been
year.
listening to it. I basically had it as a download for a long time, so I didn't have anything to bring to a session. But I decided I'd buy the album and the video that goes with it. So yeah, definitely love this record. Played the track All Night, which has a very well known Outcast sample and some very nice bass playing from Marcus Miller. It doesn't sound anything like Marcus Miller, in fact.
This is one of my albums of the year, which I've only just picked up actually. It's only just come out last month. This is a Southeast London duo, Youssef Kamal, the drummer of a band called United Vibrations, and a keyboard player, and then a kind of who's who of all the kind of interesting London musicians on this album. It's been released through Brownswood, which is Giles Peterson's label, and yeah, I'm still kind of enjoying it. It's very fresh, but really great sounding original music. I mean, definitely with the George Duke lineage being heard here. Actually, that sort of Thundercatish vibe definitely coming through. So well recommended.
Yes,
Black
good.
Focus, it's called.
Then went back in time a bit to somebody we featured quite a lot actually on sessions, I think. Chocolate Genius, and this was his second album as Chocolate Genius, called God Music, which is just, again, really hard to pin down in terms of his musical style. Massively underrated, almost like, in a way, a bit like a male Michel, I think, in this
Yeah.
one, in a way.
I haven't heard anyone on the VC say that they know who he is, actually.
No, that's
but
right.
maybe someone can.
I think
Comment if
somebody
they-
replied to one of the other videos.
Yeah?
Yeah. But I played the track for One More Look at You. Really recommend all of his records, actually. I think he's a great artist. Kind of somewhere between new soul and funk and bits of all kinds of stuff going on.
Well, there was something about his vocal delivery which was very intimate, which got me thinking of this album, which is Pygmalion by Slowdive. Definitely coming from very different places, but this is a sort of mid-90s post-rock album, very much kind of slightly coming out that sort of talk vibe. And we listened to the track.
That's right, it sounded the Talk connection.
The
wasn't it?
talk
Yeah.
connection was with Chocolate Genius
Yeah.
as well, and it's called Rooting, and it's great.
I'm not exactly sure what the connection was with this, but went on to Autumn Defence, which is the band formed by Pat Sampson and John Stirrett from Wilco, and they put out 5 albums altogether. Kind of melodic, kind of pop, actually, almost kind of independent, kind of slightly independent kind of rock feel to it as well. And this is from their album before, I think this was the one before last, called Once Around. Very nice stuff, nicely produced, good songs. Quite different to Wilco, actually, much kind of less, probably less interesting lyrically than Wilco, but good stuff nonetheless, actually.
Very UK pop.
Yeah, quite influenced by Kinks, I think it was quite a big
Kinks,
influence. Yeah,
Beatles.
yeah. And you notice a bit of Squeeze in there as well.
I did. The Squeeze have a. They do this thing where they have a kind of octave above and below, not harmony, but just singing together, which is a very distinctive sound which they were employing. Well, yeah, Kinks, Beatles, Zombies, Colin Blunstone. That's how we got here. I think his first solo album called 1 Year. Again, I've seen this shown a lot on the VC, but I've never found a copy until recently. What a brilliant album this is. Really, it sounds completely contemporary. Yeah, beautiful kind of, chamber kind of string arrangements. We listened to the track called Say You Don't Mind, which is a Denny Lane track. Really highly recommended album.
Yeah.
Beautiful voice.
One of my favourites for a long time. Then went to thinking British bands, but also thinking a little bit about David Mancuso again. Went for what is, I think, the best Traffic overall album, which is John Barleycorn Must Die. And although, it's overall all strong tracks on here as well. I played the track Glad, which was a Loft favourite, I think.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure how we ended up here. We possibly might have had a break, I'm not sure. Anyway, this was a Christmas present, I think from one of my sisters, actually. In fact, I had requested it. I've always had this on CD, but never on vinyl. It's Portishead's debut album, Dummy. We listened to the track Glory Box, and it just reminded me what a groundbreaking album this was. Just something that really sounded very, very different. And this is a lovely press, so gatefold as well.
Yeah. Which original wasn't.
No.
Not exactly sure the connection between Portishead and XTC, but thinking of probably innovative bands, I
Yeah.
guess, actually, from the UK. I've been listening to this quite a lot recently, actually. It's been kind of sleeping around, really, not really been getting much attention. Yes, this is from Apple Venus Volume 1. I mean, they're just a great band, really. I mean, they're this period, they were incredibly innovative stuff they were doing, actually. And a lot of these, a lot of the records in this period have just been remastered by Steve Wilson as well. They're all kind of reappearing on various formats now.
Reminiscing that when I went to university at my freshers' ball, XTC were the band. And it was when Making Plans for Nigel was out, which was a great song, actually.
Yeah.
So, very, very talented band.
Yeah.
I guess, that sort of innovation thing carried on, and again, obviously, in terms of our tribute to departed geniuses of the year, we had to have another Bowie track, and I think often side 2 of Heroes is kind of quite neglected because of Heroes on side 1, but actually some great sort of ambient, weird music on side 2, and we listened to I don't know how Neukölln,
I think.
yeah, which features some kind of very out there Bowie sax playing. It's a Bowie Eno collaboration. Great stuff.
Thinking of Bowie Eno collaborations, then went for Fantastic Voyage of Lodger, which of course was a lot of people forget this was the third of the Eno Bowie collaborations after Heroes and Low.
Yeah. And then we topped off the Bowie selection with the original 10-inch version with the full Maria Schneider orchestra of "'Tis a Pity She's a Whore." Or no, it wasn't.
Sue.
It was Sue.
Sue.
Absolutely, sorry, it was Sue. Which I was saying to John, I remember when I heard this being played as an exclusive on the radio for the first time, and actually just being stunned at how original and different it was, and remembering the announcer on the radio didn't really have any words to describe what he just heard, because it still sounds groundbreaking, actually.
I mean, Black Star was amazing, but you could always imagine another version of Black Star with Maria Schneider Orchestra playing the whole thing, which would be pretty amazing. Not going to happen, sadly.
We had a break.
We had a break. No, we didn't have a break, actually. I thought this came on before the break.
Did it?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, no.
I mean, I had this. This has always been one of my favourite records that I've had for a long, long time on compact disc and reissues and so forth. But I was very glad to get an original version of this. This is Stan Getz's Focus with a orchestra conducted and arranged by Eddie Sauter. It's kind of like one of the most successful kind of the jazz with strings kind of experiments from the early 60s.
Oh, that would made sense after the Bowie.
Yeah, exactly, which is what I was thinking of. And I played the track I'm Late, which is the only other track with Roy Haynes on the record as well, playing it's usually impeccably. But this is a nice mono copy of this, which I managed to pick up for quite a good price from Amazon, of all places.
Well, we went back to 1958 for the next selection, which is a lovely Analog Productions mono repress of Relaxing with the Miles Davis Quintet. And we listened to the track If I Were a Bell. And this is the lineup with John Coltrane, Philly Joe Jones, Paul Chambers and Red Garland.
Classic.
Sounded great. In fact, both the last two were mono recordings. I think this was partly what the link was.
Yeah.
And actually they were both sounding fantastic.
Then went forward a few years to the first Joe Henderson album on Blue Note, which is page 1, which is actually packed full of classic tracks like Blue Bossa, Record of Me, and all kinds of stuff on here. And band with Kenny Dorham, Joe Henderson, McCoy Tyner, Butch Warren, and Pete LaRocca, who featured in the last session as well. Just a classic record, really. Classic Blue Note.
Lovely Joe Henderson playing.
Yeah.
Kind of understated.
Yeah.
And then we moved on to some Eric Dolphy, who's been a regular feature in the last few sessions. And this is the Eric Dolphy Quintet, featuring Freddie Hubbard, and the album's called Outward Bound. And we listened to the second track, Green Dolphin Street. which had...
Did we play Grindolphin Street? Was it Grindolphin Street?
It was Grindolphin
okay.
Street. We just had the beginnings of Eric Dolphy really beginning to go out. I think it's kind of quite exciting just to hear him pushing the boundaries.
Then went into McCoy Tyner. I think there's a Ron Carter connection actually was between the Dolphy and this one, and played. This was mid-70s, towards the end of his run. Actually, no, the middle of his run with Milestone Records. I mean, again, huge numbers of. I actually bought this by mistake. I meant to bring one of the records with Al Moose on, but I pulled the wrong one out. But this is a great record nonetheless, with Ron Carter and Elvin Jones. I think possibly Ron Carter's best playing was on this record actually. Trio. McCoy also plays harpsichord on a couple of tracks as well. On here. Ferocious stuff. They played impressions off here.
Well, the gauntlet was thrown down by amazing sounding upright bass playing, so I pulled out this, which is another new CD of the year, and it's a band called Thumbscrew, which is a composite of Mary Halverson on guitar, Michael Formanek on double bass, and Thomas Fujiwara on drums. And we listened to the fourth track called Trigger, which just starts with some beautiful sounding kind of bass soloing, and just really... Well, actually, there was a theme. There's a few tracks that we played across the evening which just had this amazing sense of loose improvisation where on one level it sounded like everyone was somewhere else, but also kind of had people really listening and playing together. Kind of made me think of a sort of, like they were all part of a big lump of Play-Doh that was being stretched in different directions, but still very much part of the same thing. Really great.
Yeah, she's great. I think Mary Halverson's really good. Michael Formanek did a really nice tribute. He was a friend of Jacko's, which is kind of a weird connection. Don't know why. Don't know even how I know that. But,
No.
Then thinking of that kind of mixture of improvisation and composition in this case, went right back in time to 1969 UK and the first Tony Oxley album, The Baptized Traveller, which was on a budget CBS label in the UK called CBS Realm. Early lineup with Evan Parker playing actually almost completely straight on the track I played, which was Charlie Mariano's Stone Garden. Kenny Wheeler, Derek Bailey, Jeff Klein on bass as well. The rest of the album's much more improvised than Stone Garden track, but you can hear the beginnings of a particular kind of sounds, really. Very, very UK sounding. Baptized Traveller, quite a rare record.
Very different from the Ronnie Scott's house band.
Yes, that's right, where he played a lot. He played with Stan Tracy
We took a break and we came back. We always have for Doug, because I know he's a regular watcher, a little reggae section. And we went with some classic rocksteady from Alton Ellis and the track called La 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 on the Studio One label. Vintage stuff.
Vintage. I went slightly less vintage, but stayed with the reggae thing and played. I've been listening to a lot of Sly and Robbie recently. I've been really getting into Sly and Robbie. I think we played some at the last session, in fact, as well. So I played the 12-inch Struggle Rocky Music, which was on Taxi, which is absolutely minimalist. Basically just piano, bass and drums. That's it, actually. And they still managed to carry the whole track and the mood of the whole thing with virtually nothing. It's incredible, actually. So this was kind of one of the very many Taxi releases from the, I guess, the mid-80s we're talking about, 83.
Well, the drum and bass aspect of this got me actually playing an album that I'm on, which I picked up in a vegan record shop in Deptford a few weeks ago. This is back from the early 90s and a band that I was in called Metropolis, and a track called Metropolis, which was a very heavy-duty instrumental funk track.
Sounded great.
With an amazing drummer called Andrew Small, who was just joining us for a couple of gigs, and this venue sort of recorded it and put it out. I didn't know it was on vinyl until I saw it in the shop.
Some very meaty sounding bass playing from
Thank you.
yours truly as well. So, what happened to Andrew Small? Where did he play?
I don't know.
He was a good drummer.
Very good drummer.
I mean, yeah, it's very, very funky. Something about funky drum and bass made me think of EU, the go-go band from Washington, D.C. And I played the second half of a long piece called Show Enough Bumping, which is on two sides of a 12-inch single. Also kind of quotes from Mace, who we played at the last session as well.
Back in stride.
Back in stride. And basically, and it's just kind of, there's just this kind of thing with go-go. It's still happening now. It's like a real local music. It's Washington and I think bits of Baltimore as well. It's still going on now.
Not quite sure how we got from EU to Marvin Gaye, but I picked this up, double album, Hear My Dear, the Divorce album, at a record fair that I went to with my daughter a few weeks ago. And I always had this on CD, but the vinyl is how it ought to be heard, I think. And it's just a great album. I mean, obviously it was done contractually because Marvin needed to pay off his wife for the divorce, but it's actually a fantastic album. And we listened to the track Anger.
I think, I'm not sure how the connection was made to the next one. I think my mind might have gone Motown, Bob Babbitt, Denise Williams. But that's something like that anyway. But this was a kind of slightly later, I think it might have been early 80s actually. Early 80s. Denise Williams' album was on Arista. Played the track What Two Can Do, which has just a nice mid-tempo soul tune. Really. I mean, she's great, Denise, really.
Well, I stayed very much in the early 80s and played, this could qualify as the worst cover of the night, but fantastic. Plenty of competition. From Kenny Burke here. Bass player, Philly bass player.
Cardigan wearer.
Well, as I'm wearing a cardigan, I'm modelling his style. The album's called Changes, and the absolute classic, Rising to the Top. If you don't know that, it's a bit like the Maze track that we played last session. It's just an absolute club classic that you just brings memories flooding back. And actually, I don't know if it was a track David Mancuso would have played, but at the sort of he had this kind of pattern of the sort of feel of the music he'd play, and the last section was called Re-Entry, which is kind of, you've played your really sort of fast dance tracks and you're just kind of bringing people back down to earth so they can safely leave the space, and this definitely would always fit into Re-Entry, the last couple of hours when you're just winding down.
Definitely. And Mark's new speakers brought out, I never heard this kind of weird, there's a weird kind of delay on the bass drum.
Yes.
Double, I never heard it before. Probably for Bin DJing, and we'll follow that track with this one, actually, which is, or maybe the other way around, actually.
I think maybe the other way around, because this brought it up again.
Patrice Rushen's Forget Me Nots, which was, Patrice started off as a kind of jazz fusion child prodigy, really, and then moved into kind of mid-tempo kind of soul music, and then back into fusion again as well. Prince was pretty obsessed with Patrice, and I think this is in a way a little bit of an obscure tribute to George Michael, because I think this was one of his favourite records as well. And we didn't actually have any George to play.
We didn't.
So anyway, and there's a George Michael track that samples Forget Me Nots as well.
Yeah, well, I guess there was something to do with keyboard players who dabble in a bit of fusion. And this was a slightly odd Ahmad Jamal album that I just picked up recently from Dusty Groove. He does a lot of kind of covers of sort of funk and soul tunes. We listened to his cover of The World's a Ghetto. He's playing Rhodes, Fender Rhodes throughout. A little bit overproduced, probably. But I got it very cheap, and I just love his playing. And for me, it's been a bit of a discovery for this year.
And weirdly goes back to his roots with Cadet, because Richard Evans produced it as well.
Right.
So he was the house.
Oh, was
one
he?
of the house producers, and bass player. Yeah. Then after I got into a run of CDs. Actually,
you did.
I don't know why it was. Anyway, this is my other record of the year, which I've tried to buy on vinyl, but only had really horrible copies of it, which is Nels Cline's Lovers double CD, double double vinyl as well, though. If you do get the vinyl, treat it with some caution. So I've had some Duff copies of it. On Blue Note, which was his, and Nels Klein, of course, improv guitarist, but also guitarist with Wilco. We went to see Wilco.
We did.
Last month. Who was a
Amazing.
sensational gig.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. But this is very different to both his previous work on his own and also his work with Wilco. I mean, he's kind of aimed to make an easy listening record almost, and it covers people from as varied as Arto Lindsay, Henry Mancini, all kinds of different people on here. Very beautiful, large ensemble, arranged by Michael Leonhardt, who's worked a lot with Steely Dan and other people. Very, 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 very peaceful, relaxed, beautiful record, actually. Kind of romantic record, actually.
Had a bit of a journey into Satchinanda vibe, this
Yeah.
track you played.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of harp on here as well, so there's a bit of a kind of, but really interesting, good originals, very interesting choice of covers as well. And so Nels Klein and Beyonce.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get both of
my
those.
selections of the year.
Well, another fantastic gig that John and I saw in the same week that we saw Wilco was Donny McCaslin and his band. Donny McCaslin, who obviously was the sax player on the Bowie track that we played earlier on, and features heavily on Black Star. It was supposed to pretty much be the Black Star band, and we did have Jason Linder on keyboards and Mark Giuliano on drums, but we didn't have Tim Lefebvre, but we did have Jonathan Marron, who was great, who I've seen many times with the Groove Collective when he used to come over, and also often he was the second bass player with Michelle. And this is a great album, definitely worth seeking out. And we listened to the last track called Remain. Yeah, very cutting edge electronic.
Almost prog, actually.
Almost prog,
Yeah.
Really good, very intense gig. Clearly, it was a big deal for them to be back in England. I think it seemed to mean an awful lot to them.
They were very emotional.
Yeah, great gig.
Some sensational keyboard playing from Jason Linder as well. He was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Something about the textures on there reminded me of one of my favourite records, actually, which is Scar by Joe Henry, who's known as a producer but also as a great artist on his own right. This is a record with, I think I played it before at a session actually, with Ornette Coleman, featuring Ornette Coleman. Plays this couple of wonderful solo pieces on here. Michel Ndege, cello, Brad Meldau, all kinds of people on here. Really nice. Still sounded very fresh actually. Something that's well over 15 years old.
Very nice production.
And played the track Lock and Key from here. If you haven't heard Joe Henry and you like the kind of, anything from kind of Wilco-ish old country through to Michelle, really, you could get into this record. Very good.
Lovely kind of ambient, splashy cymbals and stuff, which
great.
kind of got me onto the Paul Motion Trio and the album called Le Voyage. And we listened to the song Folk Song for Rosie. And this has some beautiful bass playing by J.F. Jenny Clark. Jean-François Jenny Clark. And Charles Brackeen on the tenor and soprano sax, and obviously Paul Motion on the drums.